The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello, I'm Charles Christian, and welcome to another Weird Tales radio show. Our big story this episode is going to be all about plague and pustules as we head off down to Great Yarmouth and the Tide and Time Museum. We've got a new exhibition running the whole of the summer, all about medieval medicine in all its gory details. However, before we do that, going to have a little bit of seasonal folklore relating to swallows and cuckoos and noodles. Yes, I did say noodles. And now here's Janie to talk about cuckoos and swallows and spring-like birdies.
Yes, because we have spring and we experienced cuckoos and swallows as harbingers of spring week ago, really, a couple of weeks ago. So obviously that prompted having a look into all the folklore, legend, omens related to cuckoos. And it's fascinating, actually. Goes back, even goes back to pagan times. Ooh. I have found. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about from about the Middle Ages. We're kicking there, and that's when they actually thought that cuckoos brought the spring with them, because of course they had absolutely no idea where they'd been all winter. And
where do cuckoos migrate to?
Africa.
Africa.
Yes. Not exactly sure, but Gabon. Somewhere, mm-hmm. I think they might be. Yeah, because they're quite a hefty bird, aren't they, to fly all that way? But yes, they do. And because they in Middle Ages, they didn't have much idea when things would happen, not having long-range weather forecasts and things like that. But the minute they heard a cuckoo, farm workers apparently were given the day off, and much celebrating, and obviously drinking, naturally. And it was even called cuckoo ale. They got that whole day off to just go and get drunk. Because I guess, actually, it was quite a miserable time in winter for your average middle-aged peasant.
Yes.
And, but even the Celts and Iron Age settlers, of course, they had no appreciation of bird migration. And they just seemed to, cuckoos disappear, and then they'd come back. And that went right through into the 19th century. People had no idea. Anyway, it was worse than that. They actually thought that cuckoos could change into kestrels. Although actually, if you look at them in a bird book, which of course they probably didn't have then in the Iron Age, they do look more like sparrowhawks. And on that note...
Yes.
Right. What were they like, honestly? Geese and woodcock were thought to fly into the moon. That's where they went. Mm-hmm. And swallows hibernated in mud at the bottom of ponds. There's an awful lot of folklore around the cuckoo. Actually, I could go on and on and on. But I don't think you're going to let me, are you? Probably. Anyway.
When the cuckoo clock says cuckoo,
yes,
it's time for you to go.
Yes, I would say there's even times when the cuckoo was associated with arriving, and that changed where you were in the country, which again does make sense if they come from the south. So the traditional time was the 14th of April, which I think was a little bit early. That's in the southern counties, and then getting to Scotland by about the 24th. Mm-hmm. Obviously stopped over in the Midlands for, I don't know, just for the crack. And, and it's all shifted around a bit in later years. But, yeah, there's so many omens related to hearing your first cuckoo. and what it meant to you. And I will give you a few.
Please
just
do.
To excite and interest you. Right, if you heard the cuckoo from your right side, it was lucky. But if you heard it from the left, it was unlucky. So strike one for us, because we heard it on our right.
We did.
Now, if you have money in your... These are really ancient. These are sort of... And quite widespread as well. I'm not just making them up.
Yep.
If you had money in your pocket, you'd have it... When you heard the first notes of the cuckoo, you'd have it all year. If you didn't, you'd be poor all year. Well, I don't know about you, but I didn't have a brass resoux in my pocket because we were out doing a walk with the dogs, weren't we? But no matter.
No.
Because there's an omen that says, if when you first hear the cuckoo you're standing on grass, it bodes well. But if you're standing on earth or stones, well, you'll be dead by next spring.
Aha.
Okay.
And we were on grass.
Pardon?
We were on grass.
We were on grass, yes. So 2 strikes, good. 1 strike, not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is money? Money's
Poor
nothing.
but alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the number of calls could also show how many more years you have to live or to marry, which obviously appears from folk tales to be all that women ever thought of the whole flippin' time.
To be fair, that was the only way they were ever going to get out of the farmhouse.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. There's quite a lot of divinations with hair, as in hair off your head.
All
and
right.
Cuckoos, which, yes, I shall come to. Obviously, we know about cuckoos. This is just a little sidebar that its habit of laying eggs in another bird's nest and chucking the baby birds out, I should say, which is not very nice, cuckoos, is where cockgold is meant to come from.
Ooh.
You know, man who was bringing up somebody else's. The other thing that struck me is actually cuckoos are associated with stupidity and being a little bit, maybe a little bit mad.
Well, you say someone is cuckoo, don't you?
Exactly, you say you're cuckoo. And yet, they get other birds to raise their young. They don't do a thing. Then they off to their holiday homes in Africa in the cold weather. So they fly to their villas in Africa. It's nice and warm. And then everybody celebrates when they arrive back. And there's drinking.
Yeah. So who's...
Stupid? I don't think so.
No.
Anyway, this hair thing is another funny old thing where if you look down at your foot, and actually if you look in your shoe, if there's a hair, as in from your head or other places, I don't know about other places, but human hair,
yes.
Don't know. If it's black, it's going to be bad luck. If it's white, it's going to be good luck. If it's grey, bit meh.
Is when you're hearing a cuckoo?
Yes, of course. This is all cuckoo-based. Yes.
It's just that when I'm out in the countryside and I hear a cuckoo, my first instinct isn't to look for errant bodily hairs.
Well, that's because you were in ignorance until I told you. Now you know. And again, comes back to if you're a lady or a young girl, in 1685, Mother Bunch's closet.
Oh, we like that.
Which obviously we never put down that book, do we?
We don't.
She apparently says to her daughter, "Put off your shoe and stocking and let me look between your great toes." Now, daughter, see what colour is that hair, and it will be the colour of your husband's hair.
Ooh.
Unless, of course, she's got hairy toes. And then I'm thinking husband, it's not going to happen really, is it?
No.
Unless you kind of like hairy, I don't know. But I did wonder, again, being a little bit cynical, her future husband, there's one of his hairs in between her toes, i.e. she's been naked with the mat. Can you see where I'm going with this?
Oh, the little hussy.
Yes. What were they doing that she's got hair in her toes?
Yeah.
Mind boggles, doesn't it? Oh, good on her, I see. Anyway, then there's swallows, which of course we also saw.
Yes.
Not many weeks, days later.
We saw the swallow first.
Oh, so did we?
We saw the swallow on Easter Sunday.
Oh,
and we heard
we did, yes.
No, Palm Sunday. We heard it on Palm Sunday, and then the following Sunday we heard the cuckoo on Easter Sunday.
Yes. There is some folklore that says which it's lucky to hear first and which is bad luck to hear first, but I can't find any information on it. But of course they're another harbinger of spring, aren't they? And there's a lot of rhymes about leaving their nests alone or ill luck would follow. And that does go back a long way as well. And anyway, there's a rhyme that's very well known, and that's the robin and the wrens are God's Almighty's friends. And that's the robin and the wrens are God Almighty's friends. The martin, which is kind of like a swallow, and the swallow be God Almighty's birds to hallow, as in revere.
Yes.
And of course it's always been unlucky to destroy them, if you look back in time, since about 1650 is the first reference of when you're asked not to destroy them. So obviously, I think, hello Tesco's.
Yes, they've taken their nets down.
Anti-swallow netting. Yes. No wonder your profits are down.
Yes.
Just
there
saying.
You go. Yeah.
Just saying. And, all sorts of things. I mean, if you shot or killed a swallow and you had cows, they would milk blood.
Mm-hmm.
And you would be punished because they were sacred, basically. Yes. Yeah. So right up to the mid-19th century, destroy a nest and bad luck and trouble will follow. There was a lovely little thing in a book, I thought it was so sweet. It said, it is thought poor manners to destroy a martin's nest while he is abroad. That's very English, isn't it?
It is.
So sweet. And, in the 18th century, it was deemed good luck to have swallows build a nest in your eaves.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a report, just to hammer the idea home, of a farmer who shot 17 swallows and he had 17 cows. Guess what happened to them?
They died.
Yeah, you got it. Anyway, so that's the news we have here on Cuckoos and Swallows.
And the other thing with cuckoos and the coming of spring and the fact people thought the cuckoos brought the spring with them, it also leads to what are known as the noodle tales of daft villagers doing things. And one of the noodle tales is the people who saw the cuckoo in a tree and decided they wanted summer to stay with them all the year round, so built a wall around it. But then the cuckoo flew out of the tree and over the top of the wall, and they said, "Oh, we almost did it, if only we'd built the wall a little bit taller."
I think noodle is being quite kind, really. I'm thinking village idiots, possibly.
Well, yes, but it's a big thing, and there's all this, the wise men of Gotham and the moonrakers and the like, and often the villagers were making out they were stupid for other reasons. So one lot were thought to be doing that so that King John wouldn't build a hunting lodge, and the moonrakers, and there's several versions of them, they were trying to rescue some barrels of smuggled brandy from the bottom of a pond when the excise men came upon them, and they had rakes in their hand, and they pointed to the reflection of the moon in the water and said, we're just trying to get that big cheese out of the water. And the excise men said, oh, yeah, idiots, and rode away. So it's quite clever, but it's a big thing that they did it. And there's a whole raft of noodle tales, but I say the cuckoo features with building the wall to keep summer here forever.
Right. So all these years you've been saying, oh, you noodle. I thought you were being cute, and it was a compliment. It turns out
I
I'm an
thought
idiot.
you are a crafty idiot.
A crafty idiot. Yeah, all right then. I'll live with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Something wicked this way comes. Weird Harvest Press presents Harvest Hymns, the sweet fruits and twisted roots of folk horror. A 2-volume set of books investigating the music of folk horror, featuring contributions from some of the biggest names in the field. Candia McCormack, Johnny Trunk, Maddie Pryor, Sharon Krause, Jim Jupp and Kemper Norton, to name just a few. Available now via lulu.com. 100% of all Weird Harvest Press profits are donated to wildlife charities.
Welcome, fool. You have come of your own free will to the appointed place. It is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man. The Wicker Man.
Right, I'm here at the Time and Tide Museum in Great Yarmouth, talking to Philip Miles, the exhibition officer with Norfolk Museums, about their current exhibition, which is on the subject of medieval medicine. So, Philip, of all the topics you could choose, why did you come up with that? The summer season, let's have plague and pustules.
Yeah, so Great Yarmouth is a medieval walled town, so there are important medieval roots to the area. But this shows a touring exhibition from the Jorvik group in York. Right. And York is also a medieval walled town, so there was a real synergy between the two areas. And they produced this show and gave us the opportunity of adding a little bit of a Yarmouth flavour to it. So we signed up, and we're really pleased that we're the first venue on the nationwide tour of this show.
Excellent. And how long is the tour running? You only opened, last weekend, I think? Yeah,
so it opened last week, and it's running until the 22nd of September this year, and then it goes on off around the country thereafter.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of listeners, what are the opening hours for the museum?
Yeah, we're open 10 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. throughout the summer, and that's daily.
Including Sundays?
I believe so. It might be 12 till 4 on a Sunday, but check the website for details.
Right, which is?
So if you Google Time and Tide Museum, or it's museums.norfolk.gov.uk.
Right, and you've also got a Facebook page as well that's useful.
Yeah, all the normal social media channels. I think our opening hours are up on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Right. Tell us a little about the theme of the way you've organised it, because we had a little preliminary look around, and you've got, if you like, case studies, and you encourage people to spin a wheel, see what ailment they've got, and then follow it round.
Yeah, so we're conscious that it's a summer exhibition and that we will have lots of family groups and younger visitors coming to the museum during this time, and also schools as well. And they're quite serious topics. The exhibition does deal with death, serious illness, and so we wanted to make sure that these topics were treated sensitively and appropriately, but there was also appropriate inroads for our younger visitors to engage with the exhibition as well. So it's a real balance between factual information about medieval medical practices, modern day sort of research into those health conditions, and then a little bit of family fun thrown in for good measure as well.
I think you're possibly spotting the fact that children of a certain age rather like gory history, and the likes, don't they?
Yeah, and we're really delighted that Terry Deary, the author of the Horrible Histories books, has written an exclusive film for the exhibition as well. So that's featured at the end of the gallery. You get to see a bit of Terry Deary's work, and there's a couple of his songs in there as well. So yeah, definitely suitable for all ages.
Yeah. And you've got some live sessions some weekends, haven't you, as well?
Yeah, so generally during the school holidays there'll be medieval themed activities here at Time and Tide Museum and at one of our sister sites, Elizabethan House. And then over it's museums at night in May. I think it's May the 19th. Mm-hmm. Museums open for free that evening, and we'll have reenactors here dressed up as the various medical practitioners. So that should be a really great family event as well.
Yeah. And in terms of the services of if you were sick or injured in medieval times, what were your options?
Well, a lot of the time it depended on your social status and how much money you had. So in our exhibition, we've sort of looked at 5 medical practitioners in detail, and each of them would have come with a cost, really. So the most expensive would have been the physician. So you would have had to have been pretty well off to seek the treatment of what they considered to be a bona fide doctor. Down to the barber surgeon, who was a barber, but he'd also cut various bits off you and pull various bits out if you paid him enough money. Religion was really important in the medieval time as well. So we have a nun here who represents how the church looked at treating ailments, and whether some illnesses were considered an act of God and prayer could help cure you. We have a cunning woman who, sort of in Terry Deary's film, refers to herself as being victimised and called a witch. Mm-hmm. Which, if you were quite poor and in your villages, then you may have to have sought treatment from a cunning woman. And then the final practitioner is an apothecary, so a sort of precursor to your pharmacists today, and they would have mixed up various herbal remedies and treatments and would have given you their own advice, but there would have been a cost to that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I have read that when it came to treatment, you were probably safer in the hands of a cunning woman or an apothecary than you were in the hands of a surgeon or physician.
Yeah, I mean, that's... Back then there was no antibiotics. They understood the body in a very basic way compared to what we know today with X-rays and CT scans. So a lot of these treatments that the barber surgeons and the physicians would have carried out were sort of barbaric by today's terms. So no anaesthetics, no antibiotics. They would have been yanking teeth and cutting off limbs without any sort of follow-up treatment. And one of the skulls shows that's in the exhibition, a hole in the head, and they would sort of carve a hole in the head. And this practice had been going on for thousands of years. But
trepanning, isn't it?
That's the word, yeah, to release pressure. So if you were suffering from headaches, quite often they would carry out this procedure, and you were exposing the brain to the air, and medieval times weren't known for their cleanliness, and so quite a gruesome time to be around. But if you were desperate and needed treatment, you would go and seek out help wherever you could find it.
Of the ailments that you have, where you spin the wheel and find out what you're suffering from, what was the survival rate of it?
So it's mixed. People have to come to the exhibition to find out whether they lived or died. But one of the most shocking stats that I came across during the research for the exhibition was that when the plague hit Great Yarmouth in 1348.
This was the Black Death.
Yeah. So it was estimated that the population of Yarmouth was 10,000, and of those 10,000 people, 7,000 died of the plague. and those bodies had to go somewhere, and so there were mass grave pits all over the town. We're quite close to one here at the museum. Underneath the current Yarmouth fire station, they found a plague pit in the 1960s. We have a couple of skulls recovered from that on display, but there's believed to be a big plague pit underneath the Sainsbury's in the town as well. Right. So 7,000 bodies, they had to go somewhere.
Yeah. Yes, I have seen that East Anglia suffered very badly from the plague, and as you say, 7,000 out of 10,000, that's sort of two dead people for every one survivor.
Yeah,
which is a fairly appalling statistic.
Yeah, so it would have been, it was fatal. And ironically, the medieval wall that was built to defend the town, they think actually contributed to the spread. So everybody was enclosed within the walls, living in the narrow rows in close proximity. They did try and limit people who they thought were sick coming into the town, but it only took one person being able to buy their way in, and then it spread like wildfire within the walls.
Yeah. Right. How long did it take for the town to recover? Have you got any?
I don't know, but it would have been absolutely devastating to the area. So it would have taken a large number of years to. But it was a prosperous town with its port and trade links, and so it did build back up. But then, of course, there were later plagues as well.
Yes.
Nobody was really safe, and then there were lots of other nasty illnesses that you could get alongside that.
Yes. Oh, that's brilliant. Right, Philip, thank you very much indeed.
You're very welcome.
Right, we're now in the exhibition centre, and as was mentioned in the introduction, we have a number of, I suppose, test patients, example patients, and the idea is you follow their ailment around the exhibition and see what happens. Now, I'm Adam, who the picture shows me rather dramatically with an arrow through my neck because I've been shot with an arrow while trying to arrest a poacher. And I'm also going to be playing William, who's injured his thumb and is losing a lot of blood. Meanwhile, Jane here.
Well, my name is Rachel. I'm also Johanna. But Rachel's woken up one morning and discovered that her leg has suddenly swollen up all the way to the knee, from the ankle to the knee. And poor Johanna's feeling poorly and has a fever. So I'll be those two characters following the little route around the exhibition to find out what I might select as my treatment and how that works out for me.
Right, we've now been around and looked at it, and here are how the treatments went. Well, it turns out that Adam, with the arrow through his neck, put his faith in religion, and he cried out to St. Thomas Becket for help, and after being put to bed was given holy water mixed with the blood of St. Thomas, I'm not quite sure where they got that from, to drink. The water ran out of the hole left by the arrow. However, after 3 weeks of his injury, he was cured, so went on a pilgrimage to the tomb of St. Thomas à Becket in Canterbury, and this is in fact one of several miracles ascribed by the monk William of Canterbury, who wrote the biography of St. Thomas à Becket, and the story of Adam the Forester is now depicted in an early 13th century stained glass window in Canterbury Cathedral. What about you? What happened to Rachel?
Well, Rachel went the route of seeking out a surgeon, and he prescribed juice of succory mixed with vinegar. I'm sorry, I'm not really sure what succory is. But anyway, and go to bed. And then within a day, all the pain and the burning had ceased. And then 3 days later, completely healed. And this was an actual treatment which was detailed in the accounts of a surgeon called John of Ardern, who was practising in the medieval period. So, yeah, result there, worked out quite nicely. Probably would have got better anyway on that one.
I think so, yes.
And as Johanna, with my feeling a bit poorly and a fever, I went for the physician because, you're going to be getting proper treatment there because, of course, they trained for years. Not perhaps quite as long as they train now, but, well, anyway. I was prescribed a parchment and I was actually supposed to wear it around my neck. But, yes, it didn't really go that well. It didn't get better. And, in fact, in 1376, Joanna Hash suffered from this very illness. So she was a real person. And she took a man named Roger Clark to court after failing to get better, claiming he was a false physician. And he'd given her a Latin charm written on a piece of parchment and asked her to wear it around her neck. It was discovered that the parchment only contained scribbles. He probably couldn't write, to be fair. Anyway, Clark was found guilty, and it turned out he wasn't a physician and could not read or write Latin. So as a punishment, and I think he got off lightly, frankly, he was paraded around the city with the false charm round his neck. What a fool he must have looked.
He won't do that again. And as for William, who you recall had a injured thumb, he was treated by 3 surgeons, and his thumb did eventually stop bleeding. However, he can't move it properly now. And this is again a real case, going back to 1424, where a William Forrest suffered this, and he took the surgeons to court after they left him unable to move his thumb. The judge said that the surgeons acted properly in the situation and that William should withdraw his complaint, presumably on the basis of, don't you dare challenge these learned gentlemen.
Yes, you're just a lowly peasant.
Exactly.
With woad or something all over your face. That's going back a bit too far.
That's going back a bit.
All right. Cow poo.
Yes. Now, looking at some of the explanatory boards here, we do see that whereas nowadays we think of surgery and medicine and doctors, 2 elements that we don't normally have associated with healthcare these days are charms and religion. Let's go over to the charms one here. What did you think of this one?
Well, we haven't moved that far on, have we? In some ways, I think of some of the slightly strange supposed things you can do to make yourself better and improve your quality of life, like having candles stuck in your ear and lit. And that's just the first thing that came to mind. Or wearing certain religious icons and maybe putting on copper bracelets. I don't know. They work for some. They don't work for everybody. So, yes, there's something, though, we don't have now, spoken commands or adjurations. Whether these work or not, I don't know. We maybe should try them. But these were where you demanded illnesses depart and cause no further harm. And one such charm apparently imagines fevers and chills as 7 sisters and instructs them in the name of God to leave the body of the sick person. Mm-hmm. So, talking quite firmly to them.
Yes.
Sometimes, actually, texts were written down and worn on the body, as we saw with poor Johanna and the piece of scribble around her neck. Apparently, 14th century Montpellier physician Bernard de Gordon, who was one of the most influential medical figures of his day, believed that epilepsy could be kept at bay by wearing a slip of parchment inscribed with the names of Melchior, Gaspar and Balthazar, the 3 wise men who visited the baby Jesus. Yeah, couldn't hurt him, could it?
No. Go to the go to your school nativity and be cured. Now, there's one here on medical education, which is interesting. It's about the arrival of medicine as a discipline in universities, which was first taught in Oxford in England in the early 1300s, although had been a subject of study at Salerno in Italy since the 10th century. And there were also Arabic medical texts were translated into Latin. And there's a little line here about the fact that in the 1420s, English physicians tried to corner the market in providing remedies and tried to get an Act of Parliament. But they did secure an Act of Parliament to exclude all women from medical practice. And they then also tried to control surgeons, who responded by setting up their own schools and professionalising their trade. So,
Yes, I mean, that was sort of one of the aspects of witches and why they might have been persecuted beyond, obviously, all reason, was because they were somewhat encroaching and involving themselves in areas that English physicians were involved in. And so there was almost an explanation as to why they were persecuted, well, burned and drowned, etc. And it wasn't fear of them being frightening people who were going to do ill. It was that they were going to nick the money, gold, wealth that would go to English physicians.
yes.
So, witches lib, basically.
Yes. Yes, and say cunning folk, as they were called, wise women and cunning men. And then we have religion, which also played a part. The church had an ambivalent attitude. Visiting the sick was one of the acts of mercy, along with sheltering the homeless and feeding the hungry. However, the church tried at times to prevent its priests from actually practicing medicine. This was partly due to concerns around pollution by blood, and partly because medicine was becoming a profitable and distracting sideline for priests. And at the same time, the church competed with physicians for the profits to be gained from offering to help the sick by setting up saint shrines where people would go in the hope of miraculous cures. And looking at one of the information boards here, it says that different saints specialised in different cures. For example, many relics in England were associated with helping women in labour. The church also ridiculed physicians of their supposed cures, and some church artwork depicted doctors as monkeys holding up urine flasks, which was making fun of physicians and their mania for examining urine. And now we come to the grimmest of them all, surgery. And they were known as barber surgeons. As the name suggests, this was because when they weren't doing surgery, they were shaving and trimming beards and cutting hair, and anything that involved using sharp knives. Bloodletting apparently was popular as a way to maintain good health. And you might be able to identify a barber surgeon by the fact they had a bowl of blood in the window or the sign of a bandaged arm.
Yes, well, at least they did train by apprenticeship, and some surgeons did develop their own areas of expertise, such as cataract removal, which is quite astonishing, isn't it, when you think, looking here at the display of tools they might have used, how on earth they would have had the ability to do that. But yes, they did become respected medical professionals, and they sometimes did get good results, of course. I wouldn't like to look at the stats of... so that was from the middle years of the 13th century, you started to have actual surgeons performing operations.
And for ghoulish school kids going around the exhibition, there's some audio effects here of what happens, what were these various tools and what were they used for, and you can press a button and you can hear an answer. As I say, they're catering for the ghoulish schoolboys here. And then the final thing I wanted to have a look at is a spinning wheel, it's a uroscopy wheel because, as we've already mentioned, they were fascinated by the colour of urine and they used it to diagnose illnesses. So, spin the wheel, Janie.
Well, apparently I've come up here grey. My urine is grey, which I've never come across that before, and that denotes indigestion. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised I haven't had grey urine, the amount of indigestion I've had, but I'll spare you the details. Oh, if it's yellow, you have perfect digestion.
Oh, right.
That's good. Sorry about the squeaking. Oh, what have we got here? Red.
Red.
Ooh, excessive digestion.
What would that be?
I think basically you're dying if
Right.
you've got red urine. Come on. Green, patient is overheating. Yeah.
Nah.
Well, there's some disease. I can't remember. Was it King George the something or other? He had a particular disease, and the symptom of that is green urine. But of course, that was some years on, so they wouldn't have known about that. But I don't think that's the most gory. I think the next room is the most gory, which contains skeletons, skulls, etc. from various eras, but I think, yes, some of them are medieval. Mm-hmm. And we can see 3 skeletons and a case of skulls. And what we see is a patient who is lying before us, who was female, about 46 plus, and her condition was leprosy. And she also has a reconstruction of her face on a screen here, showing you step by step what happens when you get leprosy, which is rather hideous. And this poor person we can see lying in the case has lost their nose, which is apparently the first part to go, because leprosy is bacteria that is inhaled. So that's why very often the first sign you see is the chin start to redden, and then slowly, because the bacteria has obviously started off in the head, in the face, you get the distinctive loss of bone on the nose, and the eyes start to take on a different look as the skin starts to go into folds. And obviously they had, even though it's just a bacteria, absolutely no ability to treat this. So there's lots of explanations about what was given as a hope with perfumes and fortified waters and spices and black hellebore, which is obviously a plant, a theriac, which was an expensive mixture containing viper's flesh for the most advanced cases. All these obviously completely pointless, useless potions and lotions were given.
Yes, we see that the physician there would say that leprosy can be caused by an excess of black bile, which is cold like its governing planet Saturn, and in such case you would be given a hot remedy. And the fees, if you went to a physician, were very high because as it's a contagious disease, the physician was concerned his other patients might not want to come to him.
Which, of course, would be fairly correct.
Yes.
Hence the poor situation they'd end up in with a lepers colony.
Yes.
If you went the religion route, you'd be advised to try to get yourself admitted to a leper house, and there you will make a confession and do penance so that a priest can give you absolution. Prayers to the hospital's patron saint in the chapel will help on the road to spiritual recovery. You're advised that leprosy is often the result of lewd behaviour, and a good diet and cleanliness will relieve your symptoms.
Mm-hmm. And of course, if we go to the barber surgeon, he recommends cupping to draw off bad humours by scratching the skin and placing heated cups mouth downwards over the area. He can also release blood by cutting a vein, but doing this on a healthy part of the body might draw the poison in that direction, and they might also try to cleanse the wounds and seal the diseased flesh by using red-hot irons.
This one is quite graphic here. Patient male, 18 to 25, whole skeleton here. Osteomyelitis, which is a bone infection. And you can clearly see the state of the lower legs. Must just have been incredibly painful. They're, 3-4 times. This is the actual bone, the size that they should be. And it's also evident on the top of his arm. And obviously, without any antibiotics, we'll be back to, for instance, dock leaves applied to the area will reduce the heat and swelling. This is the advice you would have got from the herbalist. In the summer, vervain flowers would be brought into the house to scare away the devils that cause fevers. And the herbalist would gather them and talk all the while out loud, saying what I'm gathering them for. This makes the flowers all the more powerful.
The barber surgeon once more suggests bloodletting, but it is unwise if the moon is in conjunction with that body's parts corresponding with the zodiac. So if the moon appears in Sagittarius or Aquarius, it would be dangerous to open veins in the patient's legs. Meanwhile, the herbalist says almonds are very good for a body that has grown too hot. You rub almond oil in the affected areas, and you use the oil of the violet, a flower governed by the cold planet Saturn, which works just as well in baths for this purpose.
Right, next patient, male, 45 plus. His condition was a twist fracture of the knee, and the skeleton is here before us. Clearly a lot of damage on one of his knees and would have been extremely painful. Included with the skeleton are some brass or copper knee supports with attached string to them, which would have sought to support this severe injury. We have obviously certain somewhat useless ideas here. This was the physicians recommending a copper plate to support the knee. Copper has hidden properties. Well, yes, that's still believed, isn't it? According to the wisdom of the ancients. And the physician apparently said, I see that the skin of the knee appears dead and ulcerous. Copper is good for this too.
The church advises a crutch to help you get around and making a pilgrimage to one of the great healing shrines, such as Canterbury or Walsingham, which, if you've got a bad leg, possibly is the last thing you want to do.
Quickly.
Yep. The cunning woman recommends juice of the daffodil, which you would gather only when the moon is waxing. And don't ask me why it works. Just know it from experience that it does.
That's not you saying that.
That's
the common woman saying that.
Common
yes.
woman.
I just don't say anything. It's balmy and I'm as mad as a box of frogs, but just go along with it.
Yes. So that's give you a little flavour of this exhibition, which runs throughout the summer here. And I say, if plague and pustules are your thing, this is where you want to be, at the time and tide in Great Yarmouth. By way of a footnote to our story on medieval medicine, one of the intriguing features of the exhibition is the fact that along with physicians and surgeons, there was still in those days a very wide role played by wise women, what we nowadays call green witches, and herbalists using natural remedies, some of which were quite clearly efficacious, others which were slightly more mumbo-jumbo. It's also intriguing, though, that as medicine became more institutionalised, So the persecution, opposition of people practicing what we'd now call witchcraft started to become more prevalent. In 1512, this is in England, a law was passed to make the practice of midwifery illegal without a licence from the local bishop's court. It also restricted the practice of surgery to graduates of Oxford and Cambridge universities, and because these universities only admitted women, it made it illegal for women to practice medicine. 6 years later, the College of Physicians received its charter and attempted to prevent the practice of medicine by, and I'm quoting here, ignorant persons, common artificers, such as smiths, weavers, and women, boldly taking upon them great cures and things of great difficulty, in which they partly use sorcery and witchcraft. This law was relaxed in 1542 to allow divers honest persons, as well as men and women, whom God hath endowed with knowledge and the nature, kind, and operation of certain herbs, roots, and waters. They were exempted as long as they didn't charge a fee. However, a couple of years later, the physician to Queen Elizabeth I wrote that the sick people in St Bartholomew's and St Thomas's hospitals in London were brought to that mischief by witches and by women. And that's it. Almost out of time for this show. However, just time enough to squeeze in one final story. And this is associated with May Day. However, it's a very local one relating to St Agnes, a village on the North Cornish coast, just a little way up from Morvar. And this is about an evil giant called Bolster. He was prone to eating both cattle and children until he fell in love with the maiden Agnes. She asked the giant to fill a hole in the cliff top with his blood to prove his love for her. Unfortunately for the giant, well, fortunately for the cattle and children, the hole was bottomless and connected only to the sea, so the lovelorn giant bled to death. However, he still celebrated every May Day in the village, and his fate is used to explain why the cliffs nearby are stained red. It's a natural phenomenon, but for people of 500, 600 years ago, it needed an explanation. And so there you have it. A little bit of etiology. It was giant's blood that made it red. That's it. Hope you'll join us again next week for another episode of the Weird Tales radio show. Hope you've enjoyed this show, and until then, stay well, stay weird, stay wild, and remember, if you don't listen to the show, Beelzebub has a devil set aside for you. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @urbanfantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.